We have a video. We love watching our home videos of the kids growing up. We've got one of Carol and Nicole at Christmas opening a present. I think she's just 1 or 2 years old, and she's opening this box, and it got lots of tissue paper in there. And I don't know what the gift was. It was some kind of clothes or socks or something. Anyway, she's just going like this, just tearing all the tissue paper out, and doesn't realize, grabs the gifts, and chucks that too, and then ends up with this empty box. And she's like, what kind of sick joke is this? I mean, the look on her face, like, there's no gift in here. She didn't realize that in her frenzy of opening the thing, she threw the gift itself. One of the primary purposes, I believe, of the book of Ecclesiastes is to teach us how to avoid doing that with God's gifts. Very often, God's gifts, we throw them aside without even realizing it. We miss them for a host of reasons. There's a couple of different reasons that we're going to look at this morning. One is we miss God's gifts because we're distracted with disappointments in life. Just things about this cursed fallen world that we don't like, and they bug us so much that we get all distressed about these things, these bad things, and miss God's gifts. That's one reason. Another reason we miss His gifts is because we want different gifts. They're not the gifts we expect. It's not what we were thinking. We get so focused on the grass on the other side of the fence and the greenness of that stuff that we miss out on enjoying the pasture that God has given us. So in this section, Solomon's going to help us with both those problems. First, the distraction of the disappointments of life. And the example of, with that, he shows us one specific example, and that is the problem of corrupt politicians. So look at verse 8 of chapter 5. Ecclesiastes 5:8. I mean, you couldn't have a book about the futility of life without talking about politicians, right? So in verse 8, he says, if you see oppression of the poor and perversion of justice and righteousness in the province, don't be astonished at the situation, because one official protects another official, and higher officials protect them. The profit from the land is taken by all, and the king is served by the field. The point of all that is, he's not just griping about the government. That's not the point. He's giving us a command. Did you see the command in there? Who can find the command? What is the command? What is it? Yeah, don't be astonished. Don't be astonished. Your Bible might say surprised or amazed. That word, it's actually a negative word. It's always used in a negative context. It means to get worked up or upset about something that you didn't expect. To put it in our vernacular, I think this has the exact same meaning as our phrase, freaked out. Okay, that's the command. When you see a political corruption, don't freak out over it. Don't get worked up. Don't get upset. Don't get mad. It's not something that should ruin your day. It should not cost you any sleep. This is the norm in a fallen, cursed, futile world. Politicians have power. Power tends to corrupt. And so don't be shocked when a lot of the people who are in charge end up being corrupt. Of course that's going to happen. You don't have to like it. In fact, you shouldn't like it. It's good that you don't like it, but it's not worth getting worked up over. There's all kinds of things that in this life that you don't like, that you don't get worked up over, right? I mean, cars need oil changes every few thousand miles. That stinks. That's a bummer. But we don't lose sleep over it, right? We just accept it. That's just reality. You buy a pair of tennis shoes and they're real expensive, and you wear them a while and they wear out. You have to buy another pair. That's a bummer. It's a bad situation that we live in a world where things wear out, and the second law of thermodynamics is active on everything. Everything's decaying, and we don't like that, but we don't get all freaked out over it, right? We just go buy another pair of shoes. We just accept it as part of living in a fallen, cursed world. And when the guy that you can't stand gets elected to office, or you hear about a law that's just totally unjust, or you find that there's corruption in the IRS, don't let that ruin your day. Of course those things are going to happen in a cursed, fallen, futile world. Just expect it and get on with your day. Now, if you have the power to act, if there's injustice and you can do something about it, then do something about it, fix it. But the things that are outside of your control, don't fret about those things. Don't get worked up about that stuff. And if you find that easier said than done, You find yourself you're just so angry all the time, the government or whatever. That's probably an indication that somewhere in your heart you've developed a belief that your ability to enjoy life is dependent on government operating in a certain way. You think you have to have a fair tax code or a reasonable healthcare system or a strong economy in order for you to enjoy life. That's why you're getting worked up. And so when the politicians mess those things up, you can't take it in stride because you think your happiness is in jeopardy now. But what he's going to show us later is how things like that, they don't have any impact on your ability to enjoy life. They're not related, not even a little bit. And you could say the same about any aspect of the fall, any aspect of the curse. We live in a cursed world. We live in a fallen world. But don't let the fall get you down. Don't be shocked when things go bad. They're supposed to go bad in a cursed world. That's what curses are for. That's reality, and it's bad, but it doesn't have to throw us off the track of joy and enjoyment of God's gifts. Why? Well, we'll know the answer to that by the end of the sermon. But first, the preacher's going to bring up the other thing that tends to distract us from our ability to enjoy God's gifts. When we're throwing the tissue paper and we miss God's gifts, one reason is we're distracted with disappointments in life because of the curse. But here's another one. Money. Most of us think that money is a factor in our ability to enjoy life. And as a result, we end up loving money. The problem with that is loving money actually decreases enjoyment of life. Look at verse 10. It says, "The one who loves money is never satisfied with money, and whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with income. This too is futile." Money can be extremely useful and valuable, and it can bring you much good in life, but the moment you start loving it, you ruin it. You ruin its ability to do its job, to bring you good. Your wealth will actually make you miserable. If you start to love it, it will make you miserable because it'll make satisfaction impossible. As soon as you start loving it, satisfaction becomes impossible. That's what he's saying here in verse 10. Imagine they invented some chemical that they could put in food that would increase hunger pangs. So the more you ate, you put this on your food, the more you ate it, the less satisfied, you just get less and less satisfied the more you ate. Would you buy that? Would you order that in a restaurant? Would you put that on your food? Nobody would do that. Now, I don't think a chemical like that exists. I don't know if you can make something like that for food, but there is one for money. There is something that you can sprinkle on your money that will make that money utterly unsatisfying. And it's called love. You start loving your money, and it'll have that effect. Fall in love with possessions, and it'll ruin their ability to do their job. Loving money makes you feel poor all the time. Because no matter how much you get, it's never enough. It'll never be enough. That's one reason why not to love money. He's actually going to give us a bunch of reasons here not to love money. That's the first one. Verse 11 is the second one. He says, "When good things increase, the one who consumes them multiply." Or the ones who consume them multiply. "What then is the profit to the owner except to gaze on them with his eyes?" So the point there is, as your income goes up, so do your bills. And so do the scams, and so do all the consumers of your money. Put you in a higher tax bracket so the government gets a bigger chunk, and then there's all these other bills, and you find that you're not any richer. I distinctly remember when in our marriage when my salary went from $40,000 a year to $55,000 in one shot, just one jump. We went up that much, and I ended up with no more disposable income than I had before. The bills, the taxes and the bills and everything else went up, other expenses went up so much that our amount of money we had to spend was the same. It's amazing how when your income goes up, the bills go up with it. Not only that, but the more money you get, the more leeches you attract, right? Relatives start coming out of the woodwork, and they want to get reacquainted, and needy friends start to multiply, and the scam artists show up, and people, when they look at you, instead of seeing you as a person, many of them, they just see dollar signs. And they just try to figure out, how can they get some of it? And whenever somebody's friendly with you now, you have to question, is it because of my money? And you don't know. When you're poor, that's not a question. If they like you, they must just like you, right? That's the only reason they'd hang around you. You hear so many stories of athletes, lottery winners and everything. They have millions and millions, and then a few years later, they're broke. And you think, how could that happen? Well, it's because when you're rich, the whole world wants some of your money, and even if you devote your full time to trying to keep it, many times that won't be enough. You'll still lose it. Verse 12 that's a second problem with wealth. It increases your expenses. Consumers increase. Third problem is in verse 12. The sleep of the worker is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich permits him no sleep. So the more money you have, the less sleep you get. It robs you of rest. With money comes lots of decisions, lots of responsibilities, lots of troubles, lots of pressure. If you have a high-paying job, in most cases, the higher the income, the greater the pressure. That's why you're getting the big bucks. They're paying you a lot because you're handling important things, and so when those important things go bad, it's on you, and that's a lot of pressure. And the result is a lot of late nights at work and a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure out impossible problems, right, that you're in charge of. Meantime, the guy who's out there working with his hands, he just goes in, punches a clock, works hard all day, comes home, thoroughly enjoys a nice dinner, and sleeps like a baby. And that ditch that he's digging during the day, when he's at home playing with his kids and spending time with his wife, that ditch is the farthest thing from his mind. It's easy for him to just leave his work at work. Meanwhile, the rich guy has to... The little bit of time he does have at home, he has to take time out of that so that he can go to the gym and undo some of the damage caused by all his comfort and ease that he worked so hard to get. And so not only does he have anxiety about work, but he's got anxiety about all his stuff. That's another thing. It's not just the work, but the money itself and the possessions. Because all the stuff you get, the more stuff you get, the second law of thermodynamics is working on all of it. It's all wearing out. It's all breaking down. The more stuff you have, the more headaches. Or as Jesus put it in Matthew 6:19, moth and rust corrupt, and thieves break in and steal. See, the curse affects all your stuff. So the more stuff you have, the more exposed you are to the curse. You have a cabin in the mountains and a vacation home in the Bahamas, and you're at home here and everything, then you just take all the payments and all the maintenance and all the repairs and all the tax headaches and all the paperwork and all the problems and just multiply it times 3. How many hours of our lives are spent just managing the massive stockpile of stuff that we've got? So it takes rest away from your life. It creates anxiety. Is that worth it? Then another problem, verse 13. Here's a sickening tragedy that I've seen under the sun. Wealth hoarded to the harm of its owner. Some people are too quick to spend money. They don't know how to save, and they just that's foolish. But there's other people who have the opposite problem. They don't know how to spend. They hang on to everything. They think the whole objective with money is to accumulate as much as possible and hang on to it as long as possible. And so all they want to do is save and stockpile, which is really foolish because it makes your money worthless. Right? If you can't spend it, what is it worth? Nothing. If you're not going to use it, why have it? What good is money that's not used? Solomon can only think of one answer to that question. If you have money and you're not going to use it, then the only thing left to do is look at it. See, back in verse 11. That's what he says. What's the profit to the owner except to gaze at it with his eyes? I mean, you just pile it all up on a desk and just look at it. Or you can get your investment update in the mail and just look at the number. That's it. If you're not going to use that money, there's no other value to having it. In fact, not only does it become worthless if you're a hoarder, it actually causes you harm. Look at verse 13 again. It speaks of wealth hoarded to the harm of its owner. It messes you up. When you hoard money that should be being used for something, that money makes your life worse because hoarding is hard work. Let's face it. It's hard work to hoard your stuff, to hang on to it. You see that in the nursery. I mean, you just go into the nursery right now. If there's a bunch of little kids in there, you get one little kid that hasn't learned how to share yet. You know what that looks like? You get. I mean, he's playing with his toys. You get a kid like that. He's got his toys there, and some other little kid grabs a toy. He's like, "No, that's mine," and grabs that. kid goes off to another toy. That's mine too, and he grabs that. Pretty soon he's grabbing all the toys, and eventually he's got all these toys, and he can't play with any of them, right? Because it's all he can do to just hang on to them and make sure that nobody else gets them. And he's having no fun. What fun is that? He can't enjoy any of that because he's getting no benefit. And he'd be so much happier if you just pick one and just play with it. Pick the best one and just play with it. Don't worry about the other stuff, right? And you look at a little kid like that and you say, oh man, he's so dumb. Why doesn't he just see that this isn't making him happy? It's making him miserable, this hoarding. And yet, what do? We do the same thing. We hoard our stuff. We generate so much anxiety trying to hang on to our money that we don't even have the ability to enjoy it. Hoarding causes you harm. And not just you, your whole family, everyone in your house. Proverbs 15:27, the greedy man brings harm to his family. So how does it harm your family? Well, for one thing, people who are focused on money tend to put possessions and money ahead of people as a priority, right? And what's that going to do? It's going to generate constant conflict in your relationships. Proverbs 28:25. A greedy person provokes conflict. If you're greedy, what happens if you're greedy and your wife goes out and spends a bunch of money? What happens? Conflict. Because that money is more important to you than that relationship. Your kids do something that costs you money. Some expensive treasure gets ruined or breaks or whatever. And what happens? If you love that, it's going to affect your mood. And you're going to be grumpy or maybe even hostile or angry because you lost something you love. And you're going to find you're constantly at odds with your kids. You're at odds with your wife. You've got broken relationships all over the place. Even at odds with God. That's Proverbs. Look back at Proverbs 28:25. What does it say there is the opposite of a greedy person? You don't know because I didn't put the whole verse up there, did I? Okay. Well, it says a greedy person provokes conflict. Let's go ahead and look it up. Because I quoted it last night and I misquoted it. And it was a big distraction. So let's just look it up. Proverbs 28:25. Maybe by the next service I'll remember to actually put this in my notes. A greedy person stirs up dissension, but he who trusts in the Lord will prosper. So what's the opposite of a greedy person? Someone who trusts in the Lord. Right? So greed is the opposite of trust, which means when you're greedy, you're not only at odds with your wife and your kids and everybody else, you're at odds with God himself. Messes up every relationship. So Solomon looked around, he saw these tragic figures who ruined their lives just by hoarding their wealth. And then, to make matters worse, to add insult to injury, look what happens in verse 14. That wealth was lost in a bad venture. And so when he fathered his son, he was empty-handed. As he came from his mother's womb, so he'll go again naked as he came. He will take nothing for his efforts that he can carry in his hands. This too is sickening tragedy. Exactly as he comes, so he will go. What does one gain who struggles for the wind? So first that money ruins all his relationships, then it sprouts wings and flies away. All that money, it ends up ruining this poor guy's life 3 times. First in the gaining of it, then in the keeping of it, and then in the losing of it. And see, that's another problem with money. It disappears, and it tends to disappear right at the moment when you need it the most. Look at what happened to this guy. When did he lose his money? Right before his wife has a baby. Of all things. I mean, he's going to need the money. He wants to pass on something to his son, and at that moment when he needs it the most, it goes away. In some kind of business venture. Is there anybody in this room who's so foolish as to think that you can hold on to money that God has decided you're going to lose? It's not going to happen. God decides you're going to lose it, you're going to lose it. I don't care if it's FDIC insured, you got it locked in an underground safe in a bunker somewhere, you got taken every precaution imaginable. If God decides you're going broke, you are going broke. And that very likely will be what God decides if you fall in love with your money. He's going to have to do that. God's a jealous God. He's not going to share your love with another, with money or with anything else. And so if you start falling in love with your money, God's going to have to take action to sever that relationship. Wealth is something that costs so much to get. It costs so much to keep. It costs you so much sleep. And it can bring you so much harm. And it's so unreliable. And it yields so little satisfaction. What's to love about it? So this poor guy, he first ruins his life by trying to hold his money, and then he ends up losing all the money anyway. And then verse 17, what is more, he eats in darkness all his days with much sorrow, sickness, and anger. That's what it's like for the greedy person after greed runs its course. You end up with a dark, miserable life filled with a whole lot of sorrow and sickness and anger. You're sad because of how miserable your life is, and that starts to affect your health. And you're angry all the time. Now the anger, maybe that surprised you a little bit. You think, wait a minute, what's the connection with anger? How does greed in the heart result in an anger problem? Well, here's how it works. And this is if you struggle with anger in your life at all, any kind of anger, whether you're blowing up or whether you got this kind of low-grade resentment or irritation or frustration or whatever you want to call it, any kind of anger problem in your life, listen to this, because this is just a crucial principle for overcoming anger. The root problem is greed. Greed isn't just about money. Greed is any time you look to any earthly thing for your happiness or satisfaction. That's greed. If you look to money for your happiness, you're greedy for money. But you can be greedy for anything. There's some people who are greedy for comfort. There's some people who are greedy for convenience. There's some people who are greedy for relationships. They want a certain kind of relationship. They're greedy for that. There are people who are greedy for respect, for kind treatment, for being noticed. You can even be greedy for a godly spouse. A woman might have a desire that her husband become a spiritual leader, and that desire can actually cross the line into greed. The moment that woman starts thinking that this is something that will make her happy if she got it, and that she needs it in order to have happiness in life, she's crossed the line into greed. And greed always results in anger. Always. Because whenever someone stands in the way between you and this thing that you think you need in order to be happy, you're going to get mad. That's the natural response, is to be upset with the person. And if a circumstance comes and blocks your access to this thing you need in order to be happy, you're going to get mad at the circumstance. If you find yourself with an anger problem, you're just like irritated at your spouse all the time, you're mad. What causes that? It's caused by greedy desires. They're being blocked. That's exactly what James 4 says, right? James 4:1, that familiar passage. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from greedy desires that battle within you? You want something, but you don't get it. You quarrel and fight. That's the cause of anger. See, desire itself, if it doesn't cross the line into greed, desire itself, it can be blocked and you don't get mad. Do you know that? Do you know there's some things you desire that you're not getting and you're not mad about it? Have you ever noticed that? You're driving your car, you see a big, huge mansion, you think, man, it'd be fun to live in a place like that. I would like to live, I desire that. I would like to live in that place. But you're not getting it, and you know you're not going to get it, and you're not mad. You're fine. You're okay. Why? Because your desire for that is just a regular desire. It hasn't crossed the line into greed. If you think, boy, it'd be nice if my husband did this for me, my wife did this thing for me, but they don't do it, and you're not mad, why? Because it's a regular desire. It's not greed. But what happens when I think I need my wife to do this thing in order for me to be happy? I need her to change. I need her to do something in order for me to be happy. Then I've crossed the line into greed. I'm greedy for that treatment from my spouse. And so what happens if she doesn't do it? Anger, right? Anger, and then sorrow and sadness and darkness. It's just a dark life, and in some cases, sickness. You get so stressed out over it, you get physically ill. Anger is a very helpful symptom because it exposes something that's otherwise very difficult to find. Greed isn't easy to spot. It's hard to tell. When you desire something, you have a strong desire for something, it's hard to tell. Is this just a regular desire or is it greed? How do you know? A lot of times you can't hardly know until that desire gets blocked, and you can find out if you respond with anger or depression or whatever. And then you realize, oh, okay, yep, that was greed. So if you want to overcome an anger problem, after each episode of anger, just ask yourself, what desire in my heart got out of control and turned into greed? What was the desire? What was I wanting? If you find yourself giving someone the cold shoulder, or you find some underlying resentment in your heart towards a certain person who has hurt you, ask yourself, okay, what was I wanting and I didn't get? Respect? Kindness? What was it? And whatever it is, you just found an area of greed in your heart. You've just spotted an area of greed, and if you don't get it out, it's a cancerous greed, and if you don't get that out of there, it will infect your life, and your life will end up in darkness and sorrow and sickness and anger. And if that's the life you want, darkness, anger, sickness, sorrow, go ahead and hoard your money. But nobody wants that. No amount of money is worth that, is it? No amount of money is worth ending up like that, with misery. No amount of respect, no amount of kind treatment, no amount of getting noticed in church from people is worth that. No amount of any earthly thing is worth that. Now take a look at verse 1 of chapter 6. I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 6 here. We're going to skip the last paragraph of chapter 5 because of the way that this passage is organized. You get this whole section in chapter 5, and then the whole section in chapter 6 are like mirror images. They're both talking about the same thing. They're making all one point, and they all point together to the big climax, which is in the center, which is that last paragraph of chapter 5. And so that's the climax, so I'm going to save that to the end. So look at chapter 6, verse 1. Here's a tragedy that I have observed under the sun, and it weighs heavily on humanity. God gives a man riches, wealth, and honor so that he lacks nothing of all he desires for himself, but God does not allow him to enjoy them. Instead, a stranger will enjoy them. This is futile and a sickening tragedy. Now, he's told us this before in the book. He keeps reminding us of the same principle. Riches, wealth, honor, and enjoyment of riches, wealth, and honor are two different things. Two different things. It's possible to get everything your heart desires and still be unable to find joy in it. Did you know that? People scratch and claw and kick and scream to get money, and so often it doesn't even occur to them that they could get all the money they're seeking. And if God doesn't supply the ability to enjoy it, it's worthless. You get all the problems associated with the money, but none of the enjoyment. What good is that? He wants us to realize how dependent we are on God for enjoyment. What good is $1 that God is going to let you lose before you have a chance to spend it? How much is that dollar worth? He's going to a dollar that God is he's decided you're going to lose it before you have a chance to spend. What is it worth? Nothing, right? Some of the dollars you get, God is going to let somebody take them away from you. What good are those dollars? And some of the dollars you get, God is going to let you lose them in a bad business deal. What good are those dollars? And some of the dollars God gives you are going to be spent on a huge repair bill that you wouldn't have otherwise had. What good are those dollars? And some of the dollars you get, He's going to let you keep them, but He's not going to give you the ability to enjoy them. What good are those dollars? They'll bring you just nothing but hardship and no joy. There's no value to that. See, all the ones that will be lost or that you can't use or that you can't enjoy, they're worthless. The only ones that matter are the ones He gives you the ability to enjoy. And so, just as we saw 2 weeks ago, all these principles, they don't just apply to money, they also apply to any earthly treasure, right? Any temporal thing. All of God's temporal gifts. Even family. And health and long life. Verse 3, a man may father 100 children and live many years. No matter how long he lives, if he's not satisfied by good things and does not even have a proper burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. 100 children. That's the 100 children, a long life is the description of the epitome of earthly blessing in that culture. Now, our culture doesn't understand that. We don't understand in our culture the value of children. But biblically, in Scripture, children are always a blessing from God, and the more the better. So when he says 100 children and living many years, that's a way of saying the utmost in earthly blessing and temporal blessing. Whether it be money or a great family life, a great marriage, or a good health, or long life, or power, or success, or comfort, or leisure, or respect, or honor, or whatever. None of that has the ability to make you happy unless God also grants you the ability to enjoy it. You can get all that stuff and still die alone, he says. That's the point of the no proper burial. You end up passing from this world, and your death goes unnoticed and unlamented by anyone. You don't want that. So no matter what you gain in this life, it's all worthless unless God grants the ability to enjoy it. And to teach us that, to remind us of that, because we hear this and we just forget it and forget it and forget it. So to remind us of that, very often God gives us the gift, but he doesn't grant us the ability to enjoy it. Just so we learn. Okay, enjoyment doesn't come from the gift itself. And when that happens, if that's your life, then you're worse off than a stillborn child. Verse 4, for he comes in futility and he goes in darkness, and his name is shrouded in darkness. And that's your life. Shrouded in darkness. You get all the stuff you want, the marriage you want, the money you want, the comfort you want. You get every bit of it, but not the gift of enjoyment. And you have a life of futility and darkness, and it's a horrible life. Verse 5, though a stillborn child does not see the sun and is not conscious, it has more rest than he. And if he lives 1,000 years twice, but does not experience happiness, do not both go to the same place? Treasures of this world aren't really all they're cracked up to be, are they? They're just... And that has huge implications for how we calculate justice. You know, a lot of people think that things are unfair because they don't understand this principle. Now, the preacher in this book is very concerned with injustice, and he's going to tell us, one solution to the problem of injustice is thinking about Judgment Day. But another solution is to realize there's not nearly as much injustice as you think. There's not nearly as much unfairness out there as you think if you understand this principle. See, when you see some ungodly person out there, and he's got this great job, and a beautiful wife, and all this stuff, he's got a huge house, and cars, and all the rest, and here you are, and you're working hard, and you're being honest, and you've just got this crummy job, and leaky roof, and piece of junk car, and all this, and it seems unfair, right? Seems like injustice. But if you could see the whole story, you'd realize, no, it's not injustice. What if God has given all that stuff to that other guy, but he hasn't granted the gift of enjoyment to him? And what if in your case, you don't have much, but God has granted you the gift of enjoyment? He's made it accessible to you. Is that unfair? No. It's kind of like if you found out that you got a coworker who's you're making $20 an hour, your coworker who's not even as good an employee as you is making $50 an hour. And you think, what's going on? How is that? Why is he getting 50? I'm getting 20. And so you go to your boss and you ask, and the boss says, yes, he's getting 50, and yes, you're a better employee, but here's what you don't understand. He doesn't get to enjoy that money. We require him to cover the expenses of the shop. And that takes like 90% of his money. So he's only able to live on $5 an hour or something. All this money he's making, he doesn't get to use it. But he's still in the higher tax bracket, and he still has all the headaches associated with making that much money. He just doesn't get to enjoy it. But you, on the other hand, you get to keep your whole check. Now, does it seem unfair? No. See, it's not as unfair as you thought. There's nothing unjust about God giving some people a whole lot of stuff that remains locked behind a door. And they can look at it, but they can't enjoy it. But then he gives you the gift of enjoyment. Which would you rather have? Is it better to have happiness with a little or unhappiness with a lot? Did you ever get a toy when you were a kid as a gift, and you open it up, you're all excited about it, you're ready to play with it, and all of a sudden it says batteries not included? And you don't have any batteries in the house? I remember that happened to us a few times, Christmas times, and finally my mom realized, okay, I just need to stockpile a bunch of batteries before Christmas. And so she did that. But these people that you're so envious of, you look at their life and they've got it all. What if you're not seeing the whole picture? What if God gave them the toy but not the batteries? When God gives us earthly gifts, very often He gives them satisfaction sold separately. And you get the gift but not the batteries. What good is that? And so what Solomon is telling us here is, what matters is if you get the batteries, you get the satisfaction part. Verse 7, all man's labor is for his stomach, and yet the appetite is never satisfied. Now that's an illustration. Let's just think through what he means by that. He's talking about food in the stomach. Now, think about this for a second. How much food do you think that you have consumed so far in your life? I looked it up. According to the USDA, it says the average adult in America eats about 2,000 pounds per year of food. Now, that's a ton a year. I'm 46 years old. That's 46 tons. Subtract about 6 tons from my childhood. I wasn't eating as much then. So that gets it down to a nice, even 40 tons. Give or take a few extra Christmas cookies here and there. So here I'm staring at this pile of 40 tons of food that I have consumed. That's how much food I have eaten so far. And guess what? Guess what I'm planning on doing? The minute we're done here today. Right back to the dinner table. A whole nother, instead of 80,000 pounds, it's going to be up to 80,001 or 2. Now think about that for a minute. I've eaten all that food. The average human stomach can hold a maximum of about 8 pounds of food before it explodes. So I got this little 8-pound capacity, and yet I've eaten 40 tons of food. How does that work? And if you're thinking, oh, well, that's easy. You burn calories, you get the elimination process, all this. That's missing the point. The point here, realize this is an illustration. What he's saying here is, just as you can put 40 tons of food into your little stomach and it's not satisfied, so it is with your soul. Your soul works the same way. It's not going to be satisfied. Do you think having kids is going to satisfy the craving of your soul? It's not. You think getting married is going to do it? It's not. A new job? No. A different spouse? A better spouse? Your spouse change? No. Do you think a 6-figure income would satisfy you? 7 figures? No. All the things your soul is so hungry for, thinks it's so hungry for, you could get all of that, and your soul would be just as restless, just as empty, just as unsatisfied as it is now. And this even applies to wisdom, believe it or not. Verse 8. What advantage then does the wise man have over the fool? What advantage is there for the poor person who knows how to conduct himself before others? No advantage. Now you say, wait a second, I thought he said there was an advantage to wisdom earlier on. He did. There is an advantage to wisdom. Wisdom is tremendously valuable if you use it for the purpose of pleasing God. But in and of itself, if you just think gaining knowledge and wisdom and education is going to bring happiness and satisfaction and fulfillment in your life, you're going to be sorely disappointed. It's not going to work. It doesn't satisfy. Wisdom can do a lot of things. It can't do that. It can't satisfy the soul. Verse 9, better what the eyes see than the wandering desire. This too is futile in the pursuit of the wind. Wandering desire refers to that grass that just looks so green over there on the other side of the fence. That's wandering desire. Your desire just wanders over to somewhere else, the other side of the fence. When he says what the eyes see, that refers to the possessions, the stuff that you have in your possession on this side of the fence. The stuff God has given you. That's what God has given you, and that's better. It's better. He's not just saying be satisfied with it. He's saying it's better. For you, the greenest, the best grass is the grass God has placed right under your feet. What's on your side of the fence is better than what's over there. And letting your desires wander over there, looking for something better than what God has given you, is futile. It's chasing the wind. It's a waste of time. It's going to ruin your life. It's just going to make you empty and unhappy. That's all it's going to do. You see that woman at the gym who is, or on the advertisement, who has this perfect body, and your desires start wandering. What would it be like to have a woman like that? You see this other guy. What would it be like to? You see something, and your desires start wandering. All these things that are out of your reach, but it seems like they would make your life better if you had them. If you knew the whole story about those things, you'd know they would not make you happier. They would not. Life with those things would be worse than the life God gave you. That's what this verse is saying. The greenest grass for you is always the grass that God has given you. So we live in a fallen, cursed world full of injustice and political corruption, and they can't do anything about that. So we can't put our hope in government or anything else in this world. We can't put our hope in money. Being rich creates more problems than it solves, and loving and trusting money ends in disaster. So that's no good. So what should we do? What's the key to happiness in life? Well, verse 18. Let's go back to chapter 5, verse 18. Here is what I have seen to be good, and it is appropriate to eat, drink, and experience good in all the labor one does under the sun during the few days of this life that God has given him, because that is his lot. He says it's appropriate. It's good. Your Bible might say proper or fitting. That's the same word that's used back in chapter 3, is translated beautiful. So he makes all things beautiful in their time. That's the same word. See, this is the top of the tapestry. This is the beautiful part, the part that makes sense, and it looks beautiful. It's not just beautiful, but it looks beautiful. Like you can see it as beautiful, and it's good. That's what he's saying. Everything God does is beautiful, but there's some things that don't seem beautiful, right? Well, this is one of those things that not only is beautiful, but it seems beautiful. It seems right. It feels right. And it is right when you eat and drink and experience good in all your labor. That's good. That's beautiful. That phrase, experience good. Your Bible might say find satisfaction or find enjoyment. Holman says experience good, and I think that gets it best. Literally, the Hebrew just says, see good in all your labor. And it's the seeing of experience. Seeing in the sense of experiencing. So I think Holman gets it right on. Whatever your job is, whatever your labor is that you spend your time doing, there's good in it. And the goal is to experience that good. Okay? There's something there to be enjoyed if you're willing to see it. Whatever your job is. If you're a kid, your job is school, right? That's and your responsibilities at home. That's your job. If you're a housewife, that's your job. Or maybe you're the breadwinner, then that's your job. Whatever your job is, it's from God. And the goal is not to find a different job, a different occupation that has less difficulty. I mean, if you can find a job that's going to be more conducive to the ministry that God has called you to, great. Get that job. But realize, happiness is not found in finding a job that has less hardship than your job. That's not where you're going to find happiness. There's good and enjoyment to be experienced in the job that God has given you, even with all the hardship. But so often we miss that. We're throwing the tissue paper. We missed it. We missed the good because we're unwilling to accept our lot in life. God has given us a certain lot in life. He's given us a certain life. And we say, no, God, not this life, that life. I want a different life. And so we miss the goodness of our life. So Solomon says, experience the good in what God has given you. That's your lot. God has situated you on this side of the fence, and he's created this grass just for you. Eat it. Graze on it. Enjoy it. This job you have, God gave you that. It's a gift of God. It's got good in it. And if you're willing to accept it, he'll provide you with the gift of enjoyment because you're a believer. He'll enable you to enjoy that job if you're willing to enjoy it. You're not going to be rich, you're not going to be powerful, but you'll be happy. So often we treat God's gifts like that, like Nikki in that present and throwing the tissue paper, and we're so eager to get on to the next thing that we miss the gift that God is giving us. Whenever you have those moments of discontent in your life, where you're just kind of unhappy, with your life, you're just discouraged, you're empty. Whenever you feel that way, stop, look around in the pile of all the tissue paper, and just see if you can spot the gift that you've missed, that you've thrown aside. And whatever your task is in life, don't resent that. Don't take it for granted. It's a gift. That laundry, those dishes, those diapers, that's not a drudgery. That's a gift from God. That commute to work, that paperwork, those emails, that's green grass under your feet. And there's a huge amount of enjoyment to be had if you're just willing. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. Enjoy your work, enjoy your spouse, enjoy your kids, and even enjoy your money. Did you know that's okay? Did you know that's okay to enjoy your money? Look at verse 19. God has also given riches and wealth to every man, and he's allowed him to enjoy them, to take his reward, and rejoice in his labor. This is a gift of God. He wants you to enjoy the fruits of your labor. For he does not often consider the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with the joy of his heart, with gladness of heart. You're not the type that you're always fretting about your life. Oh man, here I am. I'm this age. I've already reached this age, and I haven't done this, and I only got this many years left, and I haven't. And you're assessing your life, and you're down, discouraged. People like this, they don't do that very much. They're not really thinking about that very much because they're just enjoying the ride. You know, there are some Christians who feel guilty about ever enjoying their wealth. They think, unless I give every dime away to the poor, I'm unspiritual. That's not true. That's not true. Now, what percentage of your money should be set aside for glorifying and honoring God? 100, right. 100%, for sure. 100% of your money set aside for glorifying God. No question about that. But one of the ways that God expects you to glorify him with your money is by enjoying some of it. You can glorify God that way. You receive it as a gift from him, and you allow your enjoyment of your money to occupy your heart with thoughts of God's love and his kindness and his generosity. That's money well spent. Because it increases your love for God. Now be careful. Don't fall in love with the money while you're enjoying it. That's always the danger. You start to love it. Don't do that. Don't love money. Love God. Use money. Use money and love God. Don't use God to get money. Okay? Use your money to love God rather than loving money and using God. We use our money to glorify God by a host of ways. You use your money to glorify God by supporting the work of the ministry that God is doing in the church, his body. We use your money that way. We use our money to glorify God by taking care of our family. If anybody's not willing to do that, he's worse than an unbeliever, 1 Timothy 5:8. We bring glory and honor to God with our money when we use it to fulfill our responsibilities in this world, like paying our taxes. You know, some of the money that you earn belongs to the government. God instructs you, pay your taxes. Romans 13, Matthew 12:21. So we glorify God with that. And when we've done that, and we've given God the first fruits of our money, and we poured our resources into the work of the kingdom the best we can, and we've taken care of our family members, it's fine to glorify God with what's left by enjoying it. Enjoying fellowship with God through the gifts that he's given you, even your money and your possessions. And God will keep you occupied with gladness of heart. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for your many, many gifts and your great generosity to us. Forgive us, Lord, for our spiritual adultery, where we fall in love with stuff, we fall in love with comfort, we fall in love with a certain kind of treatment from people. And we've got this anger in us because of it. Lord, thank you for revealing that, and I pray that you would help us to excise this cancer out of our hearts so we might bring you glory by using the money that you planted in our possession for your purposes. We pray this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.